My daughter slid that envelope across the kitchen table without saying good morning. Just set it down next to my coffee and said, "We need to talk about the rent." I'd been living in that house for 5 years. She didn't know I'd owned it for 22. I opened the envelope. Read it twice. Rent increase, itemized utilities, language about fair contribution to the household. My pen was still in my hand from the crossword. I folded the letter once, parallel to the newspaper fold, force of habit, and set it down. Then I wrote the answer to 17th across. What remains when the builder leaves? 7 letters. Legacy. Set the pen down. Said, "I'll think about it." She said, "There's nothing to think about." I picked up my coffee. She left for work. I hadn't thought of anything to drink, just needed something to hold. If this story is hitting close to home already, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe to Familix Revenge. It helps me keep sharing stories like this one. The room I lived in was the smallest in the house, originally a study. Still showed the lighter patch on the wall where a bookshelf used to stand. Window didn't close all the way. I kept it cracked anyway. The place smelled like solder and WD-40, not from anything recent. Just 40 years of the work following me wherever I went. The Fluke 87 multimeter sat on the windowsill. Bought it in 1989. Scratched my name into the back so nobody would borrow it. I check the battery when I'm thinking through something difficult. It's a habit, same as the crossword. Something to do with my hands while the rest of me works. The door latch was broken. Noah broke it moving furniture. After I'd fixed it the first time, I didn't fix it again. I had 3 people I saw regularly. Frank at the hardware store had my electrical tape order ready before I asked. 4 years running. Dottie at the pharmacy called me Mr. C, but on the park bench Tuesdays. Never once asked what I'd done for a living. These were my actual relationships. They worked because nobody needed anything from them except to show up. I should back up. In 2003, I won a lottery enough to buy a house outright cash. I was 54, standing in my apartment when the commission called. Same hand grinder on the counter, newer then. I thought about who to tell. Gina was 28, already asking about my retirement. Weston had requested a loan 2 months prior. I ground the coffee, watched it brew. Thought not yet. Not a plan. Just a delay that didn't feel like a decision until it had been 20 years. 5 years ago my knees started going. The house had a room. I moved in, paid Gina $450 a month without discussion, the kind of arrangement easier to accept than examine. For a while things were unremarkable. Then Noah started leaving my mail by the front door instead of the kitchen table. I saw it, said nothing. Then Weston came by needing $40,000, sat across from me and said, "I know you get a pension, Dad." Like that settled it. He left without finishing his lunch. A few weeks after that I heard Gina tell the neighbor her father needed a lot of looking after. I was in my room with the window cracked. I went to the filing cabinet, pulled out the manila folder. Read the property deed, not because I'd forgotten what it said, but because sometimes you need to confirm the ground is still solid. It was 3 weeks in, I asked Gina about the utilities bill. Procedural question. The numbers didn't add up and I wanted to understand the calculation. That's all it was. She'd been storing 4 weeks of something, and my question was apparently the wrong one at the wrong moment. She screamed. Not raised her voice. Screamed. "Pay the rent or get out of my house." I stood up, picked up my coffee cup. It was empty, but the gesture felt necessary. Said, "All right." Not agreement. Just the sound a door makes before it closes. I left the kitchen without looking back at her. In my room I turned the lock for the first time in 5 years. Quiet click. Somehow the loudest thing that had happened all month. I opened the cabinet, found the folder behind the tax documents, and held the deed the way I hold the multimeter, not reading it, just confirming the weight of it. Paper. Solid. Still there. What surprised me, standing there in that room she called hers, was how little I felt like winning anything. I just felt the paper in my hand and thought, she has never once asked whose name is on this. I picked up the multimeter. Battery. Fine. Set it back on the windowsill. Sat in the chair. Didn't make a call that night. Didn't need to yet. But yet had a different shape to it now, shorter. With a fixed endpoint I could finally see. Holding that deed, I thought of the day I bought the multimeter. 1989. I'd been passed over for a promotion. Younger man, louder man got it instead. I went back to my desk, scratched my name into the back of the fluke with a utility knife, checked it over. Fine. Opened the junction box I'd been working on and finished the calculation. Never asked management why. Never told my wife. Just completed the circuit and moved on. That was the year I learned that completing the work was its own answer. Back in my room, deed on the desk, I sat with the obvious question: did I actually have to do anything? The 500 increase was manageable. The door latch could stay broken. I could call Sandra in the morning and simply never pull out the folder again. Easier things had kept me quiet for longer. I sat with that for a long time. Long enough that the cabinet light in the kitchen clicked off on its timer. Then I opened my phone and entered Diane's number. Didn't call. Set it face down on the desk. The next morning came at 5:47 a.m., same as always. I got up. I called Diane at exactly 8:00 a.m., not 8:05. She pulled up the address, went quiet for a moment longer than a realtor usually goes quiet, and said the property had appreciated significantly, a number $140,000 higher than my conservative estimate. She started to ask if I knew it was worth that much. I said yes before she finished the sentence. 30 days. What's the number? She gave it. I wrote it on the back of the crossword page, the one with legacy still filled in at 17 across. Below the number I wrote 3 things: Avery's Trust, Dr. Veranda. Sandra reviewed the documentation 2 days later and found a problem. A 2019 lien discharge, roof repair, paid off in full, but the paperwork hadn't been correctly filed with the county. Titles showed it potentially outstanding. 2-week delay minimum while the correction was processed. I said, "That's my mistake. How do we fix it?" She told me. I wrote down the steps. Precision had failed me once, wasn't going to fail me twice. During those 2 weeks, Gina made lemon chicken. The dinner she'd made the night I first moved in, when both of us were still performing goodwill at the new arrangement. She set my place without mentioning the rent, the ultimatum, any of it I ate. Afterward, I sat in my room with my phone open to Diane's contact. Picked up the multimeter. Battery fine. I didn't call it off. Instead, I wrote a letter. 3 pages. Everything I'd been not yet in for 20 years finally on paper. Folded it. Put it in my breast pocket. That's where it stayed. Then Weston called. Gina had told him I was acting strange. "Dad, just pay the 500. It's not worth the drama." I said, "You're right, it's not worth the drama." He took that as agreement and hung up. I sat with the call for 2 days. In 20 years, in 5 years living in the same house, not one of them had ever asked whose name was on the deed. Not once. They hadn't calculated anything. They just never looked. I'd been invisible to them as a plain fact to be checked. Malice would have been easier. Malice would have meant they saw me. I stopped by Frank's hardware store that week. He had the electrical tape ready before I reached the counter, same as always. I told him I was selling the house. He said, "Good." I mentioned the 2-week delay on the paperwork. He said, 2 weeks is fine." I put the tape in my pocket. Then I said, "She made lemon chicken last night." Frank set down the receipt book, looked at me, said, "I know." Long pause. "You still selling?" I said yes. He handed me my change. Noah caught me in the hallway a few days later. He'd seen a piece of realtor correspondence in the mail pile, and actually looked it up. First time in 5 years anyone in that house had looked anything up. He asked if there was some issue with the property I lived in. I said, "I'm handling it." He heard a confused old man. Told Gina he thought I might be getting overwhelmed. She added it to her list. My non-answer had been true and misdirecting at the same time. Didn't feel clean. Did it anyway. I packed over 4 days. 1 box at a time, category by category. Block letters on each label: KITHFGLE HACRESH. The fluke went in my coat pocket, not a box. The letter stayed in my breast pocket. On day 3 I passed Gina in the hallway carrying a box. She didn't comment. I didn't explain. On day 4 I opened every drawer, checked every cabinet. The door latch was still broken. I held it for a moment. Then I let go. I was done fixing things that broke again. The morning I left, 5:47 a.m., no coffee. The hand grinder was in a box marked KITCHIN FRAGILE CHANDELI CAROCTILI. I carried everything to the car in 4 trips, same method as packing, 1 load at a time. Last thing, I stood in the doorway of my room and looked at the door latch. Already decided. I set the key on the kitchen table next to a sealed envelope. Exact rent amount, calculated to the day, no note. The front door closed quietly behind me. Gina called 6 hours later. I gave her the new address when she asked. She said, "You can't just leave, we had an arrangement." I said, "We did." Pause. "What does that mean?" I said, "You'll hear from a realtor." I hung up. 40 words between us, maybe. Felt like the right number. Diane called 2 days after that to confirm she'd spoken with Gina. Professional, brief. She said Gina had asked who the seller was. Diane told her the owner of record. Gina said, "That's my father." Diane said yes. There was a silence, then the call ended. I said, "Thank you, Diane." She said, "Of course, Mr. Cunningham." That was all either of us needed to say. Gina called again that evening. "You lied to us for 20 years. I said I hadn't lied. I hadn't volunteered the information, which wasn't the same thing. She said it was exactly the same thing. I said no. Lying means saying something false. I'd said I lived there, which was true. I'd never said I didn't own it. She'd never asked. 4 seconds of silence. I counted them. Then she said, "We would have treated you differently." I said, "I know." I hung up. I sat in the chair I'd brought from the old room, only furniture in the apartment. Held the phone. Picked up the flute. Checked it the way I always do when I don't know what else to do with my hands. Fine. Then I called Frank. Told him what she'd said. He was quiet a moment. "Probably true," he said. I said yeah. He asked if that was enough of an answer for me. I thought about it, said, "Getting there." We stayed on the line a while after that. I could hear the store in the background, the bell over the door, someone asking about sandpaper grits. It was enough. Gina called Avery that night. I don't know exactly what she said. Avery called me the next morning. "Careful." "Did you?" I said yes. Started explaining property documentation 2003, the commission call. Got 3 sentences in and stopped. Took a breath. Pulled the letter from my breast pocket and read her page 2. The part about her. I kept this secret because I thought I was protecting something. I was. But it wasn't the money. Avery was quiet. Then, you know the dumbest part. I used to tell people my grandpa lived with us. Like it was something we did for you. I said, "That's what I wanted you to think." She said, "I want to see the veranda." I said, "Come Sunday." The 45-day occupancy notice went to Gina and Noah by certified mail. Gina called 3 more times after that. I answered the first one, let the next 2 go. The calls got shorter each time. The last one she didn't leave a message. I filed that away the same way I file everything. Without comment, just registered and set aside. Weston didn't call. Not when Gina told him, not after. I checked my phone once a week, same day the way I check things. Scheduled, not compulsive. I stopped in February. I remember the exact week. Set the phone down after checking. Picked it up again to look at something else. And just didn't reopen his contact. That was that. Sandra filed the corrected lien discharge. Title came back clean. Sale proceeded. I found a single-story house, no stairs, eastern-facing veranda, right layout. The private doctor was a man who spoke to me like I had a full set of functioning parts, which sounds like a low bar and wasn't. Avery's trust was established, documented, filed correctly. I checked each filing twice. No loose ends this time. The letter, all 3 pages, stayed in my breast pocket through the move. I transferred it to the desk drawer in the new place. Gina never read it. I won't send it. I've made my peace with this the way I make peace with things. Some circuits I reroute. Some I don't, and knowing which is most of the work. Unpacking the kitchen boxes. I came across the lemon capers in the spice bag. I'd bought them when I first moved in. Gina had used them that last evening without saying anything about it. I set the jar on the counter. Left it there 3 days without touching it. Then put it in the cabinet. Didn't use it, didn't throw it out. Some things you just find a place for. I wrote Gina a check for the full 5 years of rent she'd charged me. No note. She cashed it within the week. I don't know if that was generous or cruel. I decided I didn't need to know. Once, standing at the new kitchen window on the second morning, I thought, was I too harsh? Stood there with that question for maybe 30 seconds. Then went to make the coffee. The hand grinder was where it belonged. That was answer enough. Avery came 6 weeks after the move. Saturday. We went to a furniture store. She pushed the cart. I said no to most things. Yes to a rocking chair with armrests at the right height. At checkout she started to say, "Dad, I can." I handed the cashier my card before she finished. He asked cash or cart. I said card. Avery watched me put my wallet back, same wallet, 20 years old, worn at the corner. She didn't say anything about it. That was the right call on her part. On the drive home, she asked if I was happy. I thought about it longer than she expected. Then I said, "I'm not unhappy." She said, "That's something." I said, "At 77, that's quite a lot." She didn't argue with that. The private doctor comes twice a week now. The physical therapist doesn't use the word fragile. The veranda faces east. Morning light, the only light I've ever preferred. I read the newspaper out there. Crossword in pen. Sunday morning, 6 weeks in. The veranda. 2 chairs. The rocking chair from the furniture store, and a folding chair Avery brought herself, kept in her car just in case. Pour over coffee, 2 cups. Hand grinder 1994. I opened the crossword, did 3 across clues, and stopped at 34 downs, what a builder leaves inside the walls. 6 letters. I wrote the first 2 letters WA and stopped. Set down my pen. Got up to refill the coffee. When I came back, Avery had filled it in warm-th. She was already on the next clue using my pen, picked it up while I was inside, didn't ask. She writes in pen now. I'm not sure exactly when that started. I waited for her to finish her clue. She handed the pen back without looking up. Neither of us said anything. The coffee was the right temperature. The light was coming from the east. The crossword was half done and neither of us was in any hurry. 17th across, what remains when the builder leaves? I'd answered that one already.